Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep the Mining podcast. And today's guest is Louise Wrathall, who's a executive director, corporate development at Central Asia Metals, who are a diverse company that operates low-cost mineral assets, producing base metals, and they have a lead zinc mine in North Macedonia and a copper operation in Kazakhstan. Lisa's a qualified geologist and has a background as a mining analyst and investor relations. And she's here today to give us an update on Central Asia Metals. And we're going to talk about ESG and also probably what investors are looking for in mining companies nowadays, if they're looking to sort of invest in mining companies and invest in our industry. So that's welcome, Louise, to the podcast. How you doing, Louise?
Hello, hi. Good, thank you.
Yeah, good meeting yourself as well. So, as we always start these podcasts off, I just wonder if you can just give us a little bit of a background about your career. As I mentioned, you're a geologist by trade. You went into being a mining analyst. So I just wonder if you can just walk us through that journey.
Yeah, sure. Well, I suppose it was started really when I came to choose my A-levels at school, and for the first time that year, my school was putting on a new A-level in geology. So I decided to give that a go, and found out that I really enjoyed that as a subject. So when it came to choosing what to do at university, geology was my first choice. So I went to university at Liverpool, studied pure geology there in 1997, graduated in 2000. I then had a year off, went traveling around South America as people do. And then I did a master's degree in mining geology at Camborne School of Mines in 2001, finished that in September 2002. I think part of the reason, I think probably not dissimilar to lots of students, when I was doing my geology degree, I didn't really know exactly where my career would go or how to actually get a sort of job out of the end of it. So I chose mining geology because I was more interested in that type of geology, really. So I kind of went down that track, but I think it was when I was doing my master's degree, I realized that I was very interested in the kind of financial and economic aspects of the geology, and really tying that in with, I guess, how businesses make money, how people create value. So at that point, I kind of knew I wanted to go towards working in the city, something financial related. So I chose to do my dissertation on a topic which I thought would help me in that direction. So my dissertation was based on whether one would invest in copper and chromite deposits in Albania, with not just taking the geology into account, but the country risk and the politics, tax, mining law, all of those aspects that we look at, either as a mining analyst or business development or whatever. So that was really interesting. And while I was doing that, I met quite a few people who were ex-Camborne and were working in the city. And I was kind of asking them all how I would go about getting a job as a mining analyst. Incidentally, I didn't really know what a mining analyst was at the time. I thought I'd like to be one, but I wasn't 100% sure what one did. But when I finished the master's was 2002, and it was a pretty quiet time for the mining sector. And there was no real jobs going in the city in terms of a new mining analyst. So I went to work in the quarrying industry for a couple of years. I worked for Hanson Aggregates, as it was at the time, and I worked in a quarry in Cumbria. I was there for two and a bit years, and that was brilliant, really, because it did give me good operational experience, certainly in terms of the processing plant, in terms of managing people as well. I was a kind of graduate trainee quarry manager. So there's lots of interesting aspects that I learned there. But I was still interested in going into the more finance side. And I had a call from a friend I'd made while I was doing my dissertation. And she said there was a job going for a junior mining analyst in London. So I applied and got the job, and I moved to London in 2004. So I was a mining analyst for 10 years until 2014. I worked in a couple of smaller brokers early on, and my last job as an analyst, I was working for Investec. I think I had my son in 2012. He's now 10, and I found the job quite difficult after that. I mean, the hours as an analyst, any equity analyst, you've got to be in the office kind of 6:30 in the morning, 6:45. It's pretty difficult with childcare, trying to find a balance, nursery, whatever, to take my son. So I did that for 2 years. But it was pretty tricky. So I was offered a package to leave Investec, which I'd effectively asked for. So I left there with an idea of going into investor relations. It's a relatively well-trodden path for an ex-analyst, although obviously I hadn't had any experience in that before. So I did some ad hoc IR consulting for another group, and then I joined Central Asia Metals in 2015, and I've been there ever since.
Okay, so so it's a journey from obviously studying geology, then out to a mines, a quarry site, then into the city, and obviously, like you said, you joined Central Asia Metals in 2014, 2015. So I just wondered if you can just tell us about the things that you've been doing whilst you've been at Central Asia Metals for the last 7 years, and obviously you've moved into the board of directors as well, or we've been appointed to the board at Central Asia Metals. So I just wonder if you can tell us a little bit about that, and obviously your experience now being a member of the board.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, as I say, I joined CAML in 2015, and initially I was doing investor relations. I was actually consulting 1 day a week, then it went to 2 days, it went to 3 days, it went to 4 days, and actually only just in May this year I started working 5 days again. And I think really that the job grew in the right kind of time as my son got older as well. I mean, he was 2 when I started working for CAML, still very small, and I still wanted to spend, you know, a lot of time with him. But as he's got older and I've had a bit more headspace, the role at CAML has grown. So it's been perfect, really, the way it has worked out. And I think the job grew, I suppose, looking back, the job grew kind of the first time towards the end of 2017 when we bought the Sasa mine in North Macedonia. So, you know, we went from not just talking about Kunrad and you know, doing my investor relations work on that, but also had a new mine to get used to present, to write about, and also a whole new team to get to know. So the job kind of grew there, which was great, and that was, you know, that was a nice challenge. And I think the next step then came probably early 2019, when we really started to focus our efforts on ESG reporting. And so we started working towards sustainability reports, which, you know, ended up being part of the IR role, really, because there's a big push on ESG sustainability from the investor side as well. So that the reporting of those aspects, you know, came into my role as well, really. So the job grew from there. And then early last year, I sort of more formally started to help out on business development as well. I'd always, you know, had a look at projects that we were interested in, but I kind of became more formally part of the team at the beginning of last year. So there was another aspect to the role which, you know, which grew nicely as well. So all those things combined, I then, as you said, joined the board in May this year. And the role is really one of corporate development, so it's still maintaining an overarching responsibility for investor relations and our overall communications. It's also ESG reporting and, you know, strategy, looking to the future for ESG and what's required of us there, and also business development, you know, how we grow in the future. So those are really the 3 aspects. And as I say, that, you know, the role has grown quite nicely from the 1 day a week 7 years ago to the job today, I guess.
Yeah, certainly. Central Asia Metals have been supportive of women in mining. Can you talk us through the journey in the industry, and from your view on gender diversification within the mining industry?
Yeah, sure. I mean, certainly there's groups like Women in Mining help massively with this. And I think most of us in our company, men and women, are members of Women in Mining. Last year, we sponsored I think three of our women at the 2 sites through the Women in Mining mentoring program. We've put another 4 through that this year, and we've also provided 3 mentees as well, in terms of Nigel, our CEO, Gavin, our CFO, and also Nick Shirley, who's our sustainability director. They're all their mentees to some of the women who are going through the program. We've also got our group people manager, Leanne Holmes. She's on the board of Women in Mining in Kazakhstan, and Dr. Gillian Davidson, our non-exec, who's chair of the sustainability committee. She's chairwoman of International Women in Mining. So I think we're very involved and, you know, very focused on having a good push on that. In terms of the industry overall, I think we are moving in the right direction. And I think that's largely because, you know, gender equality, gender diversification is firmly on the agenda now. It's talked about by all stakeholders, not least the investors. And so it is always front of mind. I think it starts by, you know, encouraging, I suppose, firstly, encouraging girls and women to study these kind of STEM subjects at school. And I think also tied into that is the mining industry doing a better job of promoting itself, really, for all the positives that the mining industry brings, producing, you know, base metals, as is our purpose, essential for modern living, metals which are going to move us forward into the energy transition. It's a really exciting time to be part of the mining industry for men or women, really. And I think it's a time where you can feel you can do something really positive for the world. So it's getting that message out there. And also making clear that, you know, you don't have to be a mining engineer or a geologist or a mineral processor to get involved in the mining industry. There's all manner of other skills required, not least environmental science, hydrogeology, those kind of aspects. So I think it's really, you know, giving a kind of a good sales pitch, I suppose, into joining the sector, really. I mean, at Sasa and Kunrad, we've spent some time last year forming diversity and inclusion committees to try to get an understanding of how we could be a better employer for women, how we could attract more women to apply for jobs with us. And we've got some good ideas there, which we're pushing forward as well. But I think overall, in terms of diversity, be it gender diversity, any other kind of diversity, we have to push for it, all of us, because more diversity must bring more diverse thoughts, which has to be better for how boards function, has to be better for how senior management teams function, and has to be better for teams on the ground as well. So I just think it's something that in general, it's so important, not just for the women themselves, but for how businesses operate, to push for all manner of diversity.
Yeah. And do you see more females getting that opportunity to move into board level roles? Obviously, you've just recently experienced it, but if you look around, do you see there is opportunities for females to step up into a board? Obviously, they've got to be given the chance, but do you see there's an encouragement for females to move into that level?
Yes, definitely. I think it is happening, and it's happening quite quickly. I think there's a push. There's certainly a push from certain fund management groups, the likes of Fidelity, BlackRock, lots of other groups will have, key percentages of women on boards that they push for, and say if we don't have X percent, sometimes it's 30%, those kinds of numbers of women on boards, and then they'll vote against certain directors or nomination committee. Those kinds of I suppose those kinds of corporate governance aspects are coming in more and more. So I think this is creating a move to encourage more women onto boards. I personally, I would hate to think, and I don't think, that I am, fulfilling some sort of quota. I think that's pretty offensive to most women on boards, and I think we would all hate to think that was what was going on. I don't believe that is generally what's going on, and so I think it's generally a recognition of saying, actually, let's try harder to maybe look, instead of the most obvious candidates. There's also, I think, a push to, move away from what they would call your Rolodex in general, the contacts that you already have for board roles, to make sure that you widen that, to look farther afield. And I suppose having a push to, attract more women onto the boards is maybe part of that. If they're not part of your contacts to look further afield, to find the right candidates. So I think there is a lot of positive movements going on in that area, and I think it will only continue. Yes.
Yeah, and I totally agree there. And I'm going to give a little plug for myself, because I'm actually working with a junior miner that is looking to bring on board members, and they want to look outside of the people that they know, and the people that they've spoken to in the past, and people within not necessarily just within the industry, but looking at people maybe giving their first opportunity or second opportunity, but just looking at that further afield. So yeah, I totally agree, and I think I suppose it should be more encouraged as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Obviously the company Central Asia Metals has established a strong set of ESG policies and targets. What is the company's focus when it comes to social and environmental engagement?
Yeah, sure. I think we I suppose it's taking a step back. I think it was 2013 when we hired a chap called Nick Shirley as our CSR, as it was called at the time, CSR director. So he's been with us now for 9 years. And he was, very quietly for a long time, making sure that we were doing all the things that we should do on the ground at Kounrad initially, and then at Sasa, in terms of, environmental, social, governance, community relations, all of those aspects. Going back to then 2019 was really when we started to get a strong understanding from our shareholders that they wanted us to get better at reporting and disclosures of our efforts in terms of sustainability and ESG. So at that point, we had a pretty steep learning curve to go through to work out what was expected from us, what other peer companies were doing, what we should disclose. I think I was very pleased that when I started delving into the sorts of aspects that we should be looking at, that we were already pretty much doing all these things on the ground. It's just we weren't articulating them well enough. So what we originally did was a kind of desktop materiality assessment to really work out the key important topics in terms of sustainability for us. And then we separated those into 5 key pillars, as we've called them. So the first one is governance, and we've got health and safety, looking after our employees, looking after the environment, and looking after the communities around us, I guess. So what we've done since then, we've published 3 standalone sustainability reports. The last 2 have been to these global reporting standards. And once you report, and you lay out your data, which kind of backs up each of the topics that are material to you, you then, on a bit of a treadmill, to set yourself targets to improve for the future. And this really is the key purpose of sustainability reporting, really. It's not just the disclosures, it's actually, making you push yourself to do better in these areas. And I think that's what we've done. So we have set ourselves targets in all of those key areas. I suppose, health and safety has always got to be our number 1 priority. So we set ourselves targets for reducing the number of lost time injuries that we have on an annual basis, and therefore our lost time injury frequency rate. Also really important to us, and also to our other stakeholders, not least the investors, are some key environmental aspects. So greenhouse gas emissions. We've set ourselves target to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 50% before 2030 from a 2020 base. We've also set ourselves targets to reduce freshwater abstraction at Sasa, and also to store our tailings waste at Sasa in more environmentally responsible manner, I suppose. In terms of community, it's really important to have strong community relationships. So we push things like local employment, local procurement, and also community support as well. We have 2 charitable foundations, one for each of the sites, and we fund those with 0.25% of our revenue. That will be, we've made a commitment to increase that towards 0.5% of our revenue for the longer term. And also we're working on projects, particularly in North Macedonia, to try to work with the community, with the local mayor, to work to generate jobs which are unrelated to the mine, really. So long-term sustainable employment. So at whatever point in the future when the mine closes, the community can still thrive. So we're looking at more kind of structural projects for the long term like that as well. So it's hard to say where our top priority is, but I think if I look at all of the 5 key areas, you know, we've got key aspects that we are working on within those kind of ESG pillars that we report on.
Obviously, I want to talk about the company's projects, the Conrad and the Sasa projects. Obviously, you're producing copper, zinc, and lead from them. Just wondering if you can just give us a quick update on the projects, and also what's contributed to the success of them.
Yeah, sure. I mean, with Conrad, I can't claim too much glory there because that was built before my time. But I think Conrad is a very interesting operation. It's not a traditional mine. So we're leaching in situ copper from waste dumps there that were generated from mining in the Soviet times from the 1930s. So it's a relatively unusual style of operation. The copper is produced by electrolysis in a process called SXEW, and we were the first group in Kazakhstan to do that, to use that technology. And I think at the time, what we did well, we had a strong technical team at kind of senior management and board level. We built the project ourselves, really. There was key aspects we purchased ourselves. We were responsible for the overall project execution. And because of that, we were able to control, much more of the aspects. And we came in with that project on time and almost $10 million under budget. So that was a good positive from the start. And I think there, because we don't move any material at all, we don't really incur mining costs. We only really incur processing costs. So it's always been a really low cost producer. And that then can weather any storms of commodity prices or inflation or, whatever happens with the local currencies, etc. So I think that was built well, and it's been a really good asset. In terms of Sasa, when we bought that in 2017, that's a producing mine. It's an underground zinc and lead mine which had been in production in various ways, shape, or form since the 1960s. So in terms of the success of that one, I think that really came down to the sort of business development efforts, really, and making sure that we did our due diligence properly and very thoroughly, making sure that we were confident in what we were prepared to pay for the asset, and really the way we structured the deal. So we took on some debt, we issued some equity, but I feel like we got the balance right to, be able to repay the debt and not stress the balance sheet, but also making sure that the deal was accretive as well for shareholders. So I feel like we got that right in terms of appraising the asset in the first place. Then, once you've now owned something, with the best will in the world, you don't know it fully until it's yours and you can really get under the bonnet, and no matter how much due diligence you do. So we set to work quite early on, really doing a full, what we call a life of mine study, to really make sure that the mine was set up for the long term. And as a result of that work, we have implemented a project called the Cut and Fill project, where we're going to change the mining method. And in doing so, that actually involves a better storage of tailings, which ties into the target I mentioned earlier. It should reduce our water consumption, again, ties into the target I mentioned earlier in terms of water. It should make the operation safer. It should be positive from community aspects. So I think all that ties in quite nicely. And once we've completed that project, which really the sort of construction phases of which will be undertaken next year and should be completed towards the end of next year, we've really got the mine then that should be set fair, like Conrad is, for the long term. So I think that's a really important piece of work, and as I say, that'll set us up well for the life of the mine, which is out to 2037. And I guess taking the two assets into account, then what's made the company successful, I think because Conrad was so cash generative, worked well early on. We instigated a dividend policy in 2012. And we've really set our stall out with that, I suppose. We've paid dividends every 6 months since. We've only missed one dividend payment, which was in like March 2020 of COVID times. That was the only one we've missed. So we're a very reliable dividend payer. And I think it's not just the dividends, it's the I suppose the capital discipline that's come to us through paying those dividends. When we look at business development activities, we do that with one eye on the dividend, that we will be able to generate cash going forward. So it I suppose, forms our way of thinking. And we've paid now, I mean, with a market cap of around about $500 million US, we've paid more than half of that out in 10 years as dividends. While doing that, we've also repaid the debt that we took on to buy Sasa. We've invested in the projects, and we've supported our other stakeholders as well. So I think all in all, it's been a positive story. It's never easy every single day, and there's ups and downs, and obviously two operations that we've got to manage well. And I think the other key aspect is, wherever it is possible, is under promising and over delivering, being very pragmatic and honest with ourselves about what we're able to do in terms of production costs, etc., and kind of articulating that well as well.
What would you say investors are looking for in mining companies if they were to invest? What are, I suppose, the main key areas? And also, why are investors investing in Central Asia Metals?
Yeah, I think a lot of it obviously does depend, because shareholders have different aspects. If in my mind, there's three reasons to invest in shares. One is a value side of things. You think the shares are cheap, they're undervalued. There's a growth aspect. You think the business is going to grow significantly over the next few years, therefore your earnings is going to grow and the share price is going to grow. And the third reason is for income. You think it'll give you a good yield. Very simplistically, those are my three reasons why you would buy shares. And I think for us, there's a case, we could make a strong case for feeling that we are undervalued, but every mining company will tell you that. But obviously what we do offer is the income side of things. So we have got a large number of income funds on our share register, but also it goes back to that part of capital discipline as well. I think in the past, some mining companies have had a bad reputation for maybe overspending on capital projects or making bad decisions in terms of M&A or whatever. And I think the capital discipline aspect that our dividend brings is something that some of our shareholders have said to us that they appreciate in terms of our mindset. So I think we may be quite conservative from that perspective. And I think also we're quite defensive as well, because our costs have been historically quite low. When commodity prices rise, our share price may not rise as much as others whose costs are higher, because we're not as leveraged from that perspective. But when commodity prices are weakening, when inflation is a big issue and costs are rising, our share price will not fall as much as other mining companies, because we've got a low cost base. And therefore, we're not immune to inflation. Of course we're not, but that's going to hit us from a low cost base. So I think there's a bit of a defensive aspect, some exposure that we offer to copper and other base metals, but from quite a defensive perspective as well.
And concluding, what's the future for future strategy for Central Asia Metals, and how does the company envisage its growth over the coming years?
Yeah, it's a good question. It is one we get asked a lot, because we're very transparent and honest. We haven't got huge amounts of organic growth in our business. Kunrad, our assets effectively are sat on the surface. They are these waste dumps, and there's little in the way of additional ore there. We're not going to find more resources per se. So that is really as it is, and we've got a life out there to 2034. At Sasa, there is some exploration potential, but I don't think it's something that's necessarily going to double the production rate or double the length of the operation. Hopefully we add another a year on here or there, and that would be a nice outcome at Sasa. And Sasa at the moment has got a life out to 2037. So we've got two good low cost, long life operations. And that is a really good base to grow from. And so when we talk about growth, we really are talking about M&A, about that kind of business development. Having just repaid all of the debt that we took on to buy Sasa by August this year, we've got a really strong balance sheet as well. The challenging bit is what the next asset's going to be and where to find it, because we'd ideally love another copper asset. That would be our top pick in terms of the future potential, our belief for the copper price. But finding a copper asset the right sort of size for us, in a jurisdiction we're comfortable with, is not always easy. So we have kind of widened our view to other metals as well, as our purpose is base metals essential for modern living. So we're more than happy with zinc. Obviously, we've got a zinc operation as it is. Zinc and lead quite often come together. We'd be interested in nickel as well, and other similar metals. So those are the kind of commodities that we're interested in. Geographically, we're very comfortable with Kazakhstan, and we're putting quite a bit of effort at the moment into looking for earlier stage exploration projects there, because we think it's quite prospective for that. So that's probably a key stage of development asset that we're looking for in Kazakhstan. And then elsewhere, we'd ideally like to look in the kind of European time zone, really. So Europe and some African countries for our next assets. I think while we still had a lot of debt, we were focused on buying production assets, because at least whatever we paid for them, we could afford to take on some debt, maybe issue some equity if needed, but have the cash flow from that asset to be paying the debt back and paying the dividends as well. So that was a key focus then. But I think now that the balance sheet is so strong, we can look a little bit further down the development curve as well, towards some projects that need building, or, as I say, further down in terms of exploration as well in Kazakhstan. So we always feel like we give a bit of a woolly answer to this, because it isn't so straightforward. But we do look at a lot of opportunities. I think in the first half of this year, we looked at 23 opportunities. We signed non-disclosure agreements for 10 of those. So, you can look at that. We looked at those quite carefully. And, we used external consultants, I think, for one of the opportunities. So again, you can get a feel for, time and money we're prepared to spend on these things. So I think we are putting a huge amount of effort into business development. And hopefully the right opportunity will come about. The one thing that we always clear to emphasize is we're not in a rush, because we've got these two great operations in Kounrad and Sasa, both with long lives. We can stay in this position for as long as needed, really, because we have got two great assets. We're paying our dividend, and we're generating cash. So I think we are in a strong position from that perspective as well.
Louise, thank you for your time. Appreciate you give us an update on Central Asia Metals. It seems you're in a very strong position as a company. I suppose moving forward, it's deciding on commodity, jurisdiction, and obviously trying to find the right project that suits you and suits obviously your culture and your values as well. So wish you well for the future. Perhaps you can come on next year on the podcast with an update on maybe a project that you've acquired.
That would be great.
Yeah. If our
Fantastic, thank you.
If our audience wants to reach out to you, if they've got any questions around obviously anything you've said, or want to get some more information around Central Asia Metals, how can they go about doing that? Are you across any social media platforms?
Yeah, we are, and my contact details are on our website as well. So yeah, more than happy to chat to whoever. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay, we'll include those in the show notes accompanying this, and if you're watching on the YouTube video, they'll be below. And yeah, if you've got any questions for Louise and for questions around Central Asia Metals, feel free to obviously reach out to Louise and her team. Thank you for listening. Appreciate you. If you can share appreciate your continued support, and appreciate if you can share this episode to others around the world, whether you're in Europe, whether you're in South America, whether you're in Australia, anywhere, wherever you are in the world. Just like I said, appreciate your continued support. Share this episode amongst your friends, family, others in the industry that may be interested in base metal operations, and maybe, or you might even have a project that you want to maybe float past Central Asia Metals. So appreciate your continued support as again, and until next time, happy mining.